Hi everyone, my name is Priya Grewal. I am an author. I've self-published 16 books with Amazon KDP. Some of the titles are The Desires of an Angel, Towns of Darkness, Evil Born of Satan, and Monster World trilogy that's suitable for children. And I've also published my first ever novel called The Creator. That's a sci-fi fantasy with publisher Austin Macaulay. So I thought that maybe I'd start a podcast because I've come across some podcasts recently, and talk about or delve into anything that's book and story related. So I'll call my podcast Book and Story World with author Priya Grewal. So I do love writing stories, and obviously, as I've stated, I've written a lot of books, quite short books with Amazon KDP of fantasy and horror genre. So today, for my first ever podcast, I thought I'd read one of the stories in my one of my books called Three Tales of Terror. The title on the front cover is Turn the Page If You Dare. So I think I am going to read one of the stories I wrote in there. It's just a quick, short, scary story. Let me just have a look. Right, so the story is story 1 in my book Three Tales of Terror on Amazon is called Terror at Nighttime. Chapter 1. Barrick turned out the lights downstairs and proceeded up the stairs of his house to go to bed. It was a Friday night. Barrick was looking forward to a good night's sleep after what felt like a long week at the bank. He had worked at one of the local banks in the high street since he was 21. He was now 40 years old. He had moved out of his parents and got his own place at 34 years of age. He wasn't married but had a girlfriend called Lyra who he had been seeing for 6 months. He didn't feel quite ready to pop the question just yet. Barrick yawned happily, reaching his bedroom, looking forward to having a relaxing weekend at home. Barrick closed his bedroom door behind him and turned his bedside lamp on. He got happily into bed, taking his slippers off and settled into his mattress comfortably. Barrick rolled over on his side and turned his bedside lamp off. Good night, Barrick yawned happily to himself, stretching his arms. Barrick closed his eyes for a few moments, trying to get to sleep. Suddenly, Barrick felt a cold wind around his feet. Barrick frowned, keeping his eyes closed. He tucked his feet in under the duvet. A few seconds later, he felt a cold wind on his face. He knew he hadn't left his window open. Barrick frowned again, keeping his eyes closed. He opened his eyes a moment later and screamed for the first time in his life. On top of him was a terrifying female demonic face snarling at him. It had demonic red eyes, grey long teeth, long wavy hair, and it was see-through. It looked to be a demonic ghost, grey in colour, with clothing on. Barrick continued to scream and scream as the female demonic ghost carried on snarling in his face. Chapter 2. Barrick was still screaming when the ghost disappeared. He panted heavily, breathing in and out. The air was silent. No one else was there. Barrick leaped out of bed and turned his bedroom light on. He looked around the room, still breathing heavily. The room was empty. Barrick opened the door to his bedroom and hurried to turn on the landing light. He turned on the bathroom light and the other bedroom light too, in his fear. The lights made him feel better. What was that? Barrick questioned himself out loud. It still felt as if fear was choking his throat. Barrick rushed downstairs, turning his living room light on. He was still in his pajamas. Barrick grabbed the blanket, which was folded neatly from the corner of the sofa. He wrapped the blanket around himself and sat on his sofa. He stared straight ahead, still in shock. He glanced at the air in the room. He was alone. A ghost, Barrick murmured to himself. It was a ghost, with demon eyes. Barrick glanced at his living room table. He had left his mobile phone downstairs. Barrick continued to speak out loud in order to feel braver. Shall I text Lyra? Barrick asked himself, to make me feel less scared. Barrick decided against it, not knowing what to say in the text. He shook his head to himself for a moment. He decided to turn on the TV to help his quivering. Barrick grabbed the remote and turned the TV on. It was on a news channel. Barrick stared at the TV, trying to take in the words being said. There's no one to call, Barrick told himself in his head. I can't call 999 and ask for the police and say I saw a ghost in my house hovering over me when I was in bed. They're going to say I'm a prank caller. Not like there's a public Ghostbusters number to call for everyone. Maybe if I Google it. Barrack wondered if there was anything like a Ghostbusters service out there if he Googled it on the search engine. Barrack only had a moment to ponder if he would come across anything to battle ghosts if he Googled it. The next moment, the demonic ghost female appeared again out of nowhere, screaming in his face. Barrack began to scream again as it stood in front of him, face level with his, screaming in his face. The face was terrifying. Barrack had never felt this feeling of being scared before. He pondered how much he hated it as he carried on screaming in the demon ghost's face as she screamed her high-pitched scream in his. Chapter 3. The demonic ghost disappeared again a moment later. Barrack stared at the empty air, panting, looking around wildly. He abruptly got off the sofa and ran to the kitchen. He turned on the kitchen light hurriedly. Barrack rushed to his kitchen drawer and opened it, withdrawing his large kitchen knife. He closed the drawer. He looked around the kitchen wildly again. I know a knife won't work on a demonic ghost, but it's better than nothing, Barrack thought to himself. The demonic ghost appeared again, standing half a head taller than Barrack. It was screaming in his face again. Barrack's scream turned into a silent choke as he stabbed at the ghost with the knife. The knife went through the female grey ghost again and again. Suddenly, she stopped for a moment, red eyes glowering at him. She smiled, a malicious fanged grin. Barrack watched in horror as the demonic ghost extended a ghostly long nail on her finger in front of his face. The ghost snarled and ripped Barrack's pajama top slowly with her nail. Barrack cried out loud as the nail digging into his skin caused him excruciating pain. Barrack looked down at his shoulder and saw the rip in his pajama top and blood spilling from where the ghost had dug her nail into his skin. Barrack glanced back into the red eyes of the ghost and cried out in terror and fear. He dropped the knife abruptly, still terrified of the ghost's face, and ran hurriedly out of the kitchen. He opened his porch door, grabbed his car keys from his coat pocket, opened his front door quickly, slammed it shut behind him, and ran to his car. He unlocked and opened his car door, quickly putting the key in the ignition. I'm going to my parents', Barrack decided in his head. He was struggling to regain his breath. And I'm never living alone again, Barrack shouted to himself in his head. He glanced up at the window above his garage. He saw the terrifying demonic ghost glare down at him, red eyes narrowing as she looked at him. The demonic ghost raised her hand and wiggled her clawed fingers at him. Barrack cried out again, quickly reversing his car out of his driveway and sped away into the night. The end. So that's my first ever podcast with a short story from my book 3 Tales of Terror, available on Amazon in paperback or Kindle. So thank you everyone for listening to my first ever podcast of Book and Story World with Priya Grewal. So take care everyone, have a lovely day, and until next time, cheerio.